AOC for president. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but there's a backing for this. So recently, AOC has officially passed Rubio on the betting market of Holly Market, hitting second place now in betting odds, right behind current Vice President JD Vance. Now, this is a big deal. Throughout this current timeline, we have seen Vance and Rubio really holding on to that 1 and 2 spot. But now we've seen this rise of AOC. She's all of a sudden in second place, and this is making some major heat waves in the political atmosphere because we're seeing a candidate who has been described as an extremist leftist all of a sudden taking the place of a man who is pretty high up in the current administration, a guy who is debatedly a Trump successor. Now Vance was the pretty obvious pick as Trump's successor, but Rubio was right there in conversations with him, and now we have again a DSA pretty far left candidate taking that place. So it's a big deal. There's a few reasons why the betting market is favoring AOC, and I will say she's not looking as good in the official polls. That's something we'll get into, but that actually doesn't matter to the betting market. They're still putting her at second for a couple of reasons. One, JD Vance made the prediction on the Michael Knowles show that AOC would be the Democrats' choice. He said in 2028, if he had to guess, and he said this isn't a certainty, but he said if we had to guess, he's taking AOC. He's saying that's who the Democrats are going to try to run in 2028. And it's not entirely illogical why a more extremist candidate may be legitimately considered in 2028 as compared to what happened in 2016 when the Democratic Party pretty much refused to allow Bernie Sanders the the running. AOC, of course, has been nominated in a way as Bernie's successor, so it'd be a pretty big shift in just 12 years for the Democratic Party from saying no way to Bernie to saying, you know what, we'll give AOC a shot. And again, it makes sense with the timeline. 2016, the Republican Party was the minority party who was looking to take back the election, take back the presidency. They were coming in with a little bit more favorability. It was a significantly more winnable election for the Republicans, so the Democrats attempted to play it safe with Hillary Clinton, and we all remember how that backfired because of the energy that the Trump movement put off back then. RIP to the original MAGA movement. It was once so glorious, now it's dead. But now in coming up to 2028, what we're seeing is because of how unfavorable Donald Trump is, not just among left wingers, but moderates are moving away from him. Republicans are moving either further to the right or moving further to the moderate end because of how unpopular Trump has been in this administration. The forever war with Iran, it's not helping him in any way. It's driving up prices, and economy very oftentimes decides elections. We are seeing our economy struggle due to the increasing oil prices. It's not looking good for the Republicans. So if there was ever a time to run a more extremist left-wing candidate, 2028 would be their chance. And that is not only a chance to get something done, because even if they fail to, in 2028, just putting someone like AOC in the presidency would almost undoubtedly shift the culture of the United States to a more favorable socialist leaning. It would not be good for our long term health. And if we examine her policies, which we will in a minute, it is very likely that as a president, she could do terrible, terrible things to this nation. But if we want to get into the actual polling right now, we still see, according to the New York Times, who basically is constantly examining polling from across the nation, all of the most reputable sources, Harris is currently sitting at an average of about 30%, Newsom at 14, and then in third place, AOC. However, because of how embarrassing of a loss Kamala Harris had in 2024, I find it incredibly unlikely that she will run or that she will get elected once 2028 rolls around. Again, we all remember how much of a, quite frankly, excuse my language, but a shit show her running was, how terrible her candidacy was, ran a terrible platform. The entire nation shifted to the right. Although, although not every county voted red, every single one voted more red than the Trump Biden election. So she ran an embarrassment, and I find it incredibly unlikely that that 30% number means anything. So AOC's real competition here will likely be Gavin Newsom. But another thing helping AOC is that she was asked last week by ABC's This Week, that's the name of the program, it was last week. She was asked if she would consider running in 2028, and she refused to rule it out. She said that she's focusing on her Congress bid currently, but she also stated that, quote, I haven't ruled out the possibility, and I'm very humbled to the tremendous amount of support out there. It's a very, very not only real but likely possibility at this point that AOC sees that the nation is shifting to the left wing. DSA candidates are more popular than ever. They've been winning elections across the nation. Throughout these primaries, they are doing very well, and I expect many of them to win in their general elections. So it's unlikely that she misses on an opportunity to run as a far left candidate with a legitimate chance to win not just a primary, but a general election. And another thing going for her is her age. She just turned 36. She would be, I believe, the youngest president in United States history. It's going to help her a lot. Young people and even middle-aged people are tired of seeing old decrepit individuals who are career politicians taking the seat of presidency. And although AOC, again, not the best policy, just that age thing's going to help her. And not to mention, or I hate to say it, AOC's looks are going to help her too. I hate to say it, but it's true. She's not the most attractive individual, but when compared to the 90-year-old grandma sitting next to her in Congress, all of a sudden AOC starts to look a little bit better. And if she's running against some old person, it's going to help her greatly. And this is a reminder, don't fall for the socialist titties. It's not a good policy. Falling for those will greatly hurt you. Never do that. So, yeah, you got to keep that in mind. But now I think it's time that we start to get into AOC's actual policy platform, what she would look like as a president. And here's a recent thing that she advocated for back in 2018. She advocated for, instead of sending, quote, 5,000 soldiers to the border, we should instead be sending 5,000 caseworkers in order to process visa applications. So this is somebody that is clearly very, very for infiltrating our country with foreigners, which has been a major Democratic policy. Because guess what? Foreigners win the Democrats' elections. There's no doubt about it. They play onto what foreigners want to hear much better than the Republican Party does. And that's because the Republican Party actually has subsects like us, like the America First movement, who genuinely believes in preserving our culture, who believes that European culture is actually something great that we should be proud of. But on the other side, the Democrats, they're almost anti-white. I mean, it's not even an almost. They're very clearly anti-white and have been for a long time. So, yeah, they're much more favorable for Muslims running in, Hispanics running in. It's not a good thing, and an AOC presidency would likely look similar to Biden, with letting droves of people across the border. I would not be surprised, and you shouldn't either, if that's what we would see under her presidency. That's my prediction right now. If she somehow wins it, expect mass migration over the border. And that's not just because that she's going to be more laxed on border security, but it's also because immigrants will perceive that she's more relaxed. It's exactly what happened in Spain very recently when they had one of their cities that was sitting bordering Morocco. completely overrun by migrants. And it wasn't even because they weren't going to send them back, but it's because those migrants perceived that Spain wasn't going to be sending them back. They believed that Spain was going to be lax. They believed that they would have a chance to break through Spain and immigrate throughout the rest of the European Union, escape Africa. And that's what we would see again under AOC. We would see people coming from our southern border in droves trying to escape South America, that whole region, to get into the United States. We would once again see a very, very bad time, dark time for the border states and for all of the sanctuary cities. We would almost certainly see an increase in crime. It would not be good in any way. It's not something that anybody should be advocating for. But yet, AOC is still very, very pro or a lack of border security. Also, we have her complaining about women having kids at a young age. Quite literally, in a recently deleted video in which she made after she broke up with her longtime boyfriend and fiance. I believe they were engaged for 3 years. They have been dating since she got out of Boston College. Recently, like in the last week, split up. And then she makes this video, which she has now deleted, where she says that people advocate for women to have children at a young age in order to get them to date quote unquote losers. Tell me how that is somebody that's going to be fit for presidency during a time when not only the United States, but the entire civilized world is seeing a drastic issue where they're not hitting replacement reproduction rates. It's not a good thing. I mean, everybody complains about overpopulation, but the truth is, none of our great nations in the world, none of the Western world, none of the civilized world is hitting replacement rates. We are all struggling through this, and what we need is somebody who's going to go in and advocate for young people to have more kids. And yet she's making videos like this. Tell me how that's somebody who's going to be able to move us through a time where we are having a very serious replacement issue. Our nation is dying because guess what? Our citizens aren't having enough kids. We're not hitting replacement levels. And I'm sure if you asked her, she would say the answer is to bring in more immigrants. That's how we fix our replacement levels. But guess what? Now we have cultural disarray and nobody feels united. We are no longer a United States, but a giant subsect, a melting pot of people who have no similarity. No, what we need is our people with our culture to start replacing. We need us to have kids. The best thing you can do for your nation is to have a large amount of children as quickly as possible. It would absolutely be the move. I appreciate that, Clinker Destroyer. Everything you've said in the chat, absolutely true. That does mean a lot. You're a real one for that. Moving on, we are also going to talk about her supporting the statehood of Puerto Rico. What's up with that? Does anybody in the United States think that Puerto Rico is in a position where they should be treated like a state? No, not at all. They shouldn't have the same representation and influence in our country because right now it is a failed state, not a state like the United States, obviously, as you know, but a state like its own subject. It's a failed state. It's not someone who should be influencing US politics. The only reason that Democrats advocate for Puerto Rico to become a state or to have the option to gain statehood is because they understand that Puerto Rico is filled with people that are quite frankly non-Americans. Why? Why? Because the non-Americans, guess where they vote? They consistently vote Democrat. It's all an election game. They don't care about these people. They don't care about helping these people. They care about securing more votes in the House, the Senate, and and in the Electoral College for the presidency. And honestly, with a potential for a state like Puerto Rico, it would be most consequential in the Senate. That's two more, two more voters from Puerto Rico in the Senate who will determine how things happen, who will consistently every single time be Democrats. That's why AOC would advocate for them to have the choice to become a state. She believes that they should have the independent decision, and that's absolutely far-fetched and a terrible idea. These people have shown that they cannot govern themselves. That's why the United States has to give them so much support. We can't add to it. It won't fix the issue. It won't actually help anybody. She is also, from her campaign page, a major advocate for women's rights. And now, obviously, myself, I'm not somebody who's going to say, away with all women's rights. That's stupid. If I wanted that, I would go live in Afghanistan and live under Sharia law. But as a America First individual, I actually believe that Sharia law is a bad thing and we should treat women like people. But when she says women's rights, here's what she's advocating for. One, equal pay. Completely stupid point because equal pay is already completely necessary. It's illegal to not pay somebody because they're a woman. It's a ridiculous idea. We have equal pay. The reason that we don't see equal outcome in this nation is because one, women tend to prefer and choose careers that pay less, that are a little bit less consuming on the individual. There is also the existence of pregnancy. Men don't get pregnant. Guess what? It's easier to have male employees. Sorry, not sorry, but it's just the truth. And also on this equal pay, women tend to not advocate for themselves in the career fields they're in. It's just it just isn't sensical in any way. You advocate for women's pay, equal pay. We already have it in every legal sense. The only thing holding women back is that they're not advocating for themselves. They choose easier fields, and I don't have an issue with any of this. I think things are pretty much how they should be in terms of that. But she's still advocating for that because she can use it as a talking point. It's all about talking points, something to throw at the voter. It doesn't make sense. It's completely nonsensical. She is also against the criminalization of sex work. She has this under her women's rights page. Sex work. Sex work is one of the most damaging fields for women, without a doubt. We look at the porn industry, we look at OnlyFans, we look at hookers. Guess what? All of these things are not only degenerating our young women, guess what? Giving them the option to become a millionaire by showing their bodies off on the internet, it's not healthy for them. And most of them won't reach that stage, and now they have their nudes blasted all over the internet, which is very damaging for their life. Sex work needs to be criminalized not only to protect women, as somebody who believes in actually protecting women, we need to criminalize sex work because it harms not just women, but guess what? It also harms young men. What do you think the porn industry has done? Porn industry, it preys upon young men who don't know any better, especially like 12, 13-year-old boys, horny, go onto the internet, they can see all this stuff, and it permanently damages their brain to a severe level. And now we're seeing that the average age that men are seeing porn, I believe, is between 10 and 11, while for women it's 12 to 13. Why do you think that hookup culture has taken over the nation? Why do you think people cannot find a proper relationship anymore? I'm not going to say porn is the only reason, but it's certainly a major contributor to how it not only destroys the minds, but also how addictive it is. We have seen in studies that porn, because it mimics what sex does to the brain, create such addictive chemicals that in many studies it has been shown that it may be harder to quit than severe drugs like heroin. So yeah, the idea of decriminalizing sex work, it's just a terrible idea for everybody involved, not just women, but also for the young men. It is just a major detriment to our society as a whole. We also have to talk about how one of her beliefs for women's rights is that she believes completely against any restrictions to abortion. She doesn't believe you should be able to restrict abortion on the state or national level. How does that protect women? Protect women to kill their own children? I would argue that the best way to protect women is to not allow for their mothers to kill them when they're babies, when they're infants. A third of Generation Z A third of Generation Alpha was killed through abortion. And you're going to tell me the best way to protect women, to protect their rights, is to take away the right to life in the womb? That is completely illogical, and that goes with everything else she said. And not only is she completely against restrictions, she is also advocating for taxpayers to fund abortion. He believes that you and me should have to pay for women killing their children. It's completely wrong and evil. Abortion as an industry only serves to murder children, and anybody who doesn't understand that is simply not looking hard enough and only looking at the things they want to hear. Studies have come out where, by and large, the science community, biologists specifically, have agreed. I believe the number is 98.4. I could be a little bit off on that. Give me like an 8% error rate on that agree that life begins at conception. Now, many of them are still pro choice, but it's because they don't necessarily value life in the womb. But now that's just an evil argument. So the only argument we can make is an ethical argument on when does the life of a human become valuable. And I would argue human life becomes valuable at the second it becomes a life. It is evil, so evil, to promote not only the murder of children, but also to promote taxpayers paying for it. So guess what? In an AOC presidency, it wouldn't be entirely unlikely to see more of your money going into industries like Planned Parenthood. Please, please tell me how that is a good idea. If any of you watching are DSA members, tell me why I should have to pay for this satanic ritual. A satanic ritual of child sacrifice, a ritual that has existed all throughout humanity, where you sacrifice the child for the good of the self. And you wonder why it's a sacrifice? Well, the major reason for abortion is because women don't feel that they are in a position to take care of it. They feel that it would harm their careers, harm their futures, harm future relationships. They are getting abortions because they believe that having a child would harm the self. So they sacrifice the child to put themselves in a better position for the future. There is no question at all. It is child sacrifice, just like we've been seeing since the days of Abraham. It's disgusting in every sense. She has also advocated for the complete abolition of ICE as an organization, as a governmental institution. Please tell me how that's a good idea. Not only do you believe we should be sending more caseworkers to the border instead of securing them, you're arguing that the immigrants who get in, how are we going to send them back? What's the answer? Do we just let them live here? Is that because that's the more humanitarian thing to do? You know what? I would tend to argue the more humanitarian thing to do is to actually care for your citizens. I know, crazy idea. It's to put your citizens first. I'll argue that they should be protected from people who are criminals just for crossing the border, criminals in their nation. They should be protected from that. They shouldn't have to fund them. They shouldn't have to pay for any of their low income housing. They shouldn't have to lose job opportunities to them. They shouldn't ever be at risk to violent criminals that are crossing the border. And sure, you can argue there's less violent criminals crossing the border than there are legal citizens. But guess what? One illegal killing somebody in the United States is far too many, and I'm not willing to take that risk with any of them. If they're willing to commit a crime to get here, I don't trust them here. How difficult of a concept is that to grasp? But no, she believes that we should abolish ICE because she's very pro bringing them over. Because guess what? Again, illegal immigrants and many cases, legal immigrants help Democrats win elections. It's not good for the future of our nation. They're only doing it because they are self-serving people. It's a giant shame. She also has a massive page on LGBT rights on her campaign page, where she says, quote, making schools safe for LGBTQIA plus students through proper accommodations. What, we're gonna accommodate a kid because they feel a little gay today? What is that? What are we gonna do? Oh, you don't got to take the test today, Jimmy. You're feeling a little gay. Like, all right, it's a joke. We're gonna accommodate them because they're playing onto a mental illness. How about we actually get them proper help and guidance instead of throwing them into a world with an insanely high suicide rate, depression rate, anxiety rate, a rate of violence, of pedophilia. All of those things exist at a much greater margin in this LGBT community than it does in any other group. Guess what? Maybe we should be helping these people instead of accommodating to their needs, whatever that means. She also believes in granting asylum to refugees fleeing persecution due to their sexuality or gender identity. Yeah, no, we don't need more immigrants here. We have more than enough. Our nation is already decaying. We can't start bringing in people because they're gay. And guess what that also leads to? Even if you want to argue, well, they're being killed there. Sure, we can play that moral argument. You know what that leads to? People faking it. People claiming that they're fleeing because of an LGBT nature. Well, it's entirely untrue and simply using that to get into the United States. How do you make them prove that? How do you make them prove that in a way that isn't sexual assault? Please tell me. You can't. You can't at all. She also believes in restoring open service for transgender people in the military. Now, as we just talked about, transgender people, extremely high depression rates, anxiety rates, extremely high suicidal ideation, and actually committing. Those aren't things that we want around our troops. Those aren't things that we want to deal with overseas. Guess what? You want to know what the most mentally stressing job you can possibly do? It's military service. That's why we put so much respect on veterans. No matter what they went through, no matter how little and how much they went through, we put a great deal of respect because it's without a doubt the most mentally stressing, draining, and traumatizing industry. So maybe it's a good idea to keep the most mentally unwell group of people in our nation by far out of the military. She is also very clear on our socialistic principles, being a long-term member of the DSA and being endorsed by the NYC DSA in her current campaign. She has pushed for universal health care, which I agree we have issues in the healthcare industry, but guess what? The answer isn't throwing it all on the government to pay for it all, because guess what that means? More money out of what will likely end up being the middle class pocket, which will continue to destroy the middle class, moving the upper middle class further into the low upper class, and that lower middle class will disappear into the lower class. That's all it will do. It won't help. It won't help. The answer to the healthcare industry and the issues we're having there, if you ask me, is more governmental regulations on the insurance companies and the healthcare industry itself that are preying on people. We have legitimate predators in that industry, and we need to do a better job of regulating them instead of putting it all on the government, who will certainly prey on us instead. When has the government not done that? So instead, let's increase regulations of the corporations themselves. That's a much, much stronger answer. She has also called for a just transition for millions of workers currently employed in the fossil fuel, automotive, and manufacturing industries, among other sectors that emit large quantities of greenhouse gases as part of her Green New Deal proposal. Really? Really, you're going to say that we're just going to transition all of those people who have spent their entire lives in that industry, who have become professionals in that field, become very successful? We're going to what? Forcibly move them fields? It's about as straight out of Marxism as I've ever heard. Forcibly transition them? Because who cares what you do as long as you're doing something, right? No, guess what? Some people actually have a passion for the automotive and manufacturing industries. Maybe it's a bad thing to move them out of a field where they have found a significant amount of success in. Just saying. And also, just maybe, guess what? Fossil fuels, oil, this whole industry, it's what runs our economy. It's what runs the entire globe's economy. How are we going to compete with any other major power in the future if we don't continue improving, improving our industry? If we don't continue to innovate? Guess what? There are answers to move away from fossil fuels, but the answer is not to just forcibly move everybody out of there and into green fields. Because guess what? Hydropower isn't the answer. Solar power isn't the answer. Wind power is certainly not the answer. These things cannot run a country. Now, we can make the debate about nuclear energy. We can start pushing towards that. But guess what? The fossil industry, it's not going anywhere. It's a necessity. It runs the world's economy. Our economy will fall apart if we move away from it. And guess what? You're gonna what? Stop letting people drive cars? A major part of an individual's autonomy as an individual is the ability to freely transport. And cars have actually added to that. That's one of the few places where we have gained autonomy over the last 100 years. We have freer transition from place to place. It is easier for us to move across the country than ever. So you can't just get rid of that. You can't just steal our autonomy like that. What, it's killing the globe? Well, everything that we actually understand about the world, it really isn't. Cars aren't the issue, and you can't just take away people's autonomy like that. It's wrong, it's evil, it forces people to stagnate. It's entirely wrong and a terrible, terrible idea. See, and like I said previously, she is also a longtime member of the DSA. And this isn't just me saying this, she and the DSA have both confirmed this to be true. And here's something directly off of the DSA's mission page. To quote, if we lived in a classless society and governed ourselves, we could freely build a world without war or poverty. We could build a world where no one suffers for their race, gender, or religion, and everyone is free, equal, and cared for. Building this world is the guiding star of our movement. When we labor for our common good instead of private profit, we can all have a secure and dignified life and use our time and talents how we wish. Tell me that doesn't sound like something straight out of the Communist Manifesto. Tell me that doesn't sound like Marx himself wrote that. Please explain to me how classlessness has ever worked. You can keep talking about how humanitarian it is. You can keep telling me over and over again how well it works and how we don't deserve to be the slaves to the upper class. But every time I have seen a classless society throughout history, time and time again, what has followed has been mass genocide in the USSR, Mao Zedong's China. It's not a successful system. Now, you can implement social systems, and I'm not opposed to these things. I've made that very clear over time. But there's a way to do it, and guess what? The answer isn't seizing corporations, giving workers more control. That's something AOC has been very pro is unions. She has advocated for the removal of or the repeal of the Taft-Hartley Act, which essentially what that does, for those of you who are unaware, was it was a bill that was passed in the mid 20th century which essentially protected workers from being forced into joining unions. It also protected unions from having too much power to the point where they can completely destroy the economy, which I have to argue is a good thing. It prevents strikes that last for absurd amounts of time. Because here's the thing about strikes, it not only destroys that industry, it destroys corporations, but it forces people out of employment. It forces people to the point where they lose their wages. It's not good to have long strikes. There has to be there has to be a little bit of understanding between the parties. Guess what? It's just as important to protect corporations as it is to protect people, because corporations are built up by people. You have to protect them, otherwise they will find somewhere else to go where they can much easier have a much easier time of exploiting people. No, you have to protect both the people from corporate exploitation while simultaneously protecting the corporation from being exploited by the people, which will only hurt the people in the long run. Over unionization is not a good thing. It is a great harm to the United States. But we're going to wrap up AOC on that note. Again, she's making a major push for the presidency. She is in a spot where she's coming second now in poly market to only JD Vance, now the Democrats front runner on that platform. She has made a strong bid. We have seen the DSA sweep across the nation. There's a real chance that we could see her not only run in 2028, but win in 2028. And this would be completely disastrous for the country. It would mean a significant amount of immigrants across the border. It could potentially mean major losses on the pro life fight. It could mean a loss of basically your own personal liberties, your ability to move around freely through the automotive industry. She's even very pro public housing, which will not help the crisis at all. It will, in fact, hurt the ability of one to actually eventually personally own housing. It's all about taking away ownership from the individual and giving it to the community. And we all know how that ends every single time. Genocidal states, a loss of ambition, a loss of happiness, a loss of personal liberty. Guess what? The issue we're having right now is people don't feel like they have a proper purpose, a proper cause to live for. They feel disconnected from everything going on. And the answer is to give them more of a way to express the self to the community instead of enforcing the community onto the individual. It is never a good thing to do that. And that's why AOC, we got to do everything we can to keep that lady from becoming president. She would be a terrible candidate, but that's the direction the Democrats are moving, and it's a dangerous direction. We've been talking about the slippery slope for years, and they called us crazy. The slippery slope doesn't exist, it's a fallacy. Well, I just slipped down a pretty steep slope and I'm starting to feel it. Keep telling me it's not real. I think AOC proves that.